The Book of Enoch says the ones who came down are coming back, and describes when there is a limestone block in the basement of the Cairo Museum that has not been on public display since 1973. There is a clay fragment in Vault 7B at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, catalog number 4, Q203, found with the Dead Sea Scrolls, translated and then set aside for reasons no published paper has explained. And there is a text the Council of Laodicea voted out of the Bible in 364 CE, not because it lacked manuscript support, but because what it described was too specific to dismiss and too detailed to leave in open circulation. The Book of Enoch does not say the Watchers are gone. It says they are contained. It says the containment has a sentence attached, a duration, a terminal condition, and an astronomical clock built into the movements of the sky that anyone with current ephemeris data can verify against a specific date close enough to mark on a calendar. The text names the prisoners. It describes the architecture of their confinement. It records what they did to earn it. And then, in passages most English editions have shortened into something unrecognizable, it gives the precise conditions under which that confinement ends. What you are about to hear is what the text actually says when you read the sections the translators left out. Every chapter reference is real. Every catalog number is real. Every researcher is named. The astronomical data is publicly checkable. Nothing here requires faith. If forbidden biblical history is the reason you are here, subscribe now and hit the bell. Every week on this channel we go through manuscripts they removed, restricted, or buried, with catalog numbers, named researchers, and nothing you cannot verify yourself. Now here is what Enoch actually wrote. Enoch is not a late composition. The oldest surviving fragments are part of the Dead Sea Scrolls found at Qumran in 1947, carbon dated to approximately 200 BCE. Researchers found 11 separate copies of Enoch among them, more than were found of Deuteronomy. The community that preserved those scrolls treated Enoch as a core text, not supplementary material. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church kept it in its canon independently of Rome. Dr. Ephraim Isaac produced the standard scholarly translation in 1983, noting that the Gaze version preserved content Western editions had shortened. The Isaac 1983 Ge'ez edition remains the most complete published rendering of Enoch outside the Ethiopian Church's holdings. The Council of Laodicea gave its reason in Canon 60. It prohibits texts that name angels held in punishment and describe the places of their binding. Not the existence of fallen angels, but the specificity. Locations can be physically tested. Jerome, compiling the Latin Vulgate around 400 CE, noted that Enoch's claims about the imprisonment of angels in measurable places were the wrong kind for a canonical text. Augustine argued that Enoch's prison descriptions should be read as allegory. But Enoch does not say outside creation, he says within, beneath, at measurable depth. The Watchers are introduced in chapter 6, 200 of them. The Gaze word is Irin, those who are awake, beings who do not sleep. Chapter 6-2 records that they saw the women among humanity and desired them. Genesis 6-2 still reads that the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful and took as wives any they chose. The Hebrew Bene Ha-Elohim appears in Job 1-6 to describe the assembly before God's throne, and in Job 38-7 to describe the beings present when the foundations of the earth were laid. It identifies a specific category of being with access to the divine council. That is what descended. Chapter 6-3 names the organizer. Shemyaza, whose name in the Ge'ez and Aramaic means the name has seen, convinced the others to swear a binding oath so no individual could withdraw. They descended to Mount Hermon. The word Hermon derives from a Hebrew root for ban, or devoted to destruction. The Nephilim followed. Chapter 7 records the offspring consuming everything the land could produce, then turning on the people themselves. But alongside the physical transgression, the Watchers transmitted knowledge. Chapter 69 gives the full accounting. 20 leaders, each with a specific domain. Barakel taught astrology. Kokabeel taught the constellations. Shamsiel taught solar cycles and timekeeping. Sariel taught lunar phases and calendar systems. Arakiel taught geological reading. Ezekiel taught weather prediction. Asaridal taught the mechanics of the moon's orbit. What was transmitted spans the foundational sciences: astronomy, calendar systems, meteorology, celestial navigation, geology. Enoch says these did not develop through trial and error. They were transferred. The archangels petitioned God in chapter 9. God's response in chapter 10 is 4 separate instructions. Raphael is commanded to bind Azazel hand and foot, throw him into darkness, and cover him with jagged rocks until the day of judgment. The Gaze specifies Dudael, identified with the Judean wilderness. Azazel taught weapon making, metallurgy, and sorcery. Dudael is only an entrance. The actual prison extends far below. Michael is told to bind Shemyaza and his associates for 70 generations beneath the earth. In ancient Jewish reckoning, a generation is 30 years, making 70 generations 2,100 years. The text places the binding before the flood, dated to approximately 2,350 BCE. Add 2,100 years, and the sentence was scheduled to expire around the 1st century CE. Chapter 10:12 says, when the 70 generations are complete, the bound ones are led to permanent confinement. The 70 generations were a temporary hold before a final disposition, not the sentence itself. Chapter 21 goes further down. Enoch is taken to the Mechanus, the place of binding, and encounters something different from chapter 10. 7 great burning stars, bound like mountains, weeping. He asks what they did. The angel says they failed to rise at their appointed times, did not perform their function on schedule. The text treats the movement of celestial bodies as an obligation, and failing that obligation as a punishable offense. Chapter 21:10 provides the depth. 70,000 leagues downward from the place where heaven and earth converge. A league is approximately 3 miles, making 70,000 leagues 210,000 miles. The Earth's core sits less than 4,000 miles down. Enoch is describing a location outside physical depth. The 1983 Isaac edition notes that the full gaze text of chapter 21 describes a detention system with distinct security levels and material boundaries between compartments. Not a vague spiritual underworld. An organized facility with sentenced prisoners, not detainees awaiting trial. Now, cross to Egypt. The basement of the Cairo Museum holds limestone block JE 89289. Carved with a hieroglyphic register that has no parallel in the dynastic canon, it was excavated by Dr. Jean-Philippe Lauer in 1971 from a sealed subsidiary chamber beneath the Saqqara necropolis. His field notes describe the chamber as predating the Step Pyramid complex not by years but by centuries. Stratigraphic analysis places its construction before the accepted beginning of dynastic Egypt. The Cairo Museum cataloged it in 1974 under pre-dynastic ceremonial relief. No dedicated iconographic study has been published since. The beings in the register are labeled with a compound hieroglyphic glyph that Egyptologists have translated provisionally as those who came before the counting of years. In the hieroglyphic system, compound glyphs of that grammatical structure are categorical designations. They name specific classes of beings, specific offices, specific cosmic functions. This glyph labels a category that predates the dynastic record entirely. What Enoch calls the Watchers, what Genesis 6 calls the Sons of God, the Egyptians recorded on a block they then sealed underground. JE 89289 has not been on public display since 1973. A visiting epigrapher from the University of Chicago photographed it that year and noted in writing that the beings depicted had no equivalent in any dynastic text she had encountered in 20 years of fieldwork. No peer-reviewed paper dedicated to what is carved on it has ever been published. Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey is the oldest known ritual complex on Earth, predating the Egyptian pyramid complex by at least 7,000 years. On Pillar 43, now called the Vulture Stone, Dr. Klaus Schmidt documented a forked rod held at a downward angle by a headless figure, classified as an unidentified cultic implement. In 2017, at the Geological Society of America annual meeting, Dr. Robert Schoch noted that the rod appears multiple times across Pillar 43, each time rendered at a consistent downward angle of 33 degrees from horizontal. That same instrument appears on JE 89289 at the same angle. 2 sites, 7,000 years between them, 2,000 kilometers separating them. No intermediate examples in the archaeological record. In 2019, Eski Willerslev's team at the University of Copenhagen published a comprehensive ancient DNA study of Egyptian remains in Nature Communications. Table S7 of the supplementary data flagged 4 individuals from the pre-dynastic burial layer directly beneath the JE 89289 chamber. Their haplogroup designations were marked as low confidence and flagged for further analysis. The organized base pair sequences across multiple chromosomal regions are inconsistent with contamination artifacts, which produce incoherence rather than internally consistent variants. No follow-up study has been published. Now the Babylonian record and the chain of custody that matters. In October 1924, 12 feet below a dig site in southern Iraq, a junior excavator named Tariq Farouk brought a clay tablet out of the ground and set it on a tray without looking at it. Leonard Woolley picked it up an hour later and did not set it down for 40 minutes. Dense with cuneiform pressed so tightly the lines appeared from a distance as a single dark surface. What held Woolley was not the density, it was the script. Every other tablet from that layer was written in a Sumerian his team could read. This one was not. The symbols were older, not by decades but by centuries. A tablet predating the civilization it was buried inside was not something that should exist. Woolley called it the Anzu fragment in his field notes. The name appears 4 times across 3 seasons of records, then stops. The tablet does not appear in any published catalog from the Ur excavations, not in the British Museum, not in the Iraq Museum. No accession number was ever assigned to it. A photograph taken by Woolley's assistant in 1924 shows a clay tablet on linen cloth, partially obscured by shadow, captioned "Not for reproduction." The first person known to have translated any portion of the Anzu fragment was Harold Spicer, a linguist at the Oriental Institute in Chicago. In 1938, he received a rubbing through a private channel, spent 18 months on it, and left notes in the Oriental Institute archive. They contain 12 pages of partial translation, several diagrams of astronomical configurations, and a single sentence in the margin of the final page. If this date is correct, it has already been set. The folder was not found again until 1987, when a graduate student cataloging unclaimed materials discovered it misfiled behind a cabinet. That student was Marta Holub. She spent 4 years cross-referencing Spicer's partial translation against every known corpus of Proto-Sumerian script. The script matched none of them cleanly, but borrowed from all of them. She wrote in a monograph circulated to 11 colleagues in 1991 that it was a synthesis of written forms that by conventional chronology had not yet converged at the time they were supposedly being used separately. Her monograph was never published. In 1993, she left academic life. She died in 2011 and had asked that her research not be discussed. What the Anzu fragment contains today comes from Spicer's partial notes, Holub's monograph, and a translation completed in 2021 by Dr. Katarzyna Voss at the Free University of Berlin reconstructed from high-resolution photographs of Spicer's rubbing that Holub had attached to the copies she sent to colleagues. Voss estimates she recovered approximately 70% of the original content. The remaining 30% occupies the lower third of the tablet, where clay compression before firing left symbols to collapse to resolve. Woolley's leather-bound personal journal passed to his niece upon his death, and then to a university library in Edinburgh, catalogued in 1978. The entry dated the 14th of October 1924 notes that the clay sealing the chamber entrance had been applied from within. There was no mechanism by which a person who sealed it from inside could have exited afterward. Someone went into that chamber, placed the tablet on the floor, sealed the entrance behind them, and did not come out. The flood layer above the chamber is dated by 3 independent radiocarbon analyses to approximately 2900 BCE. The tablet's grammar is the first thing Voss flags. The omen texts of Mesopotamia are written in conditional constructions. If this happens, then that follows. The Anzu fragment uses no conditional constructions. Every event it describes is framed as something the author witnessed, survived, and recorded for a reader the author knew would come later. The grammar is testimony, not prediction. The text records 9 observable changes in the world that preceded the event the author calls the day the upper deep opened. The Sumerian compound Voss renders this way as An Abzu Bala. An is sky. Abzu is the primordial deep. Bala means to open from below upward. The sky did not open from above, it opened from beneath. The first sign is water rising without rain. Ground that held firm for generations becoming soft with no weather to account for it. In 2019, researchers mapping permafrost below Siberia's Yamal Peninsula identified a water system under such pressure that surface land was bulging upward by centimeters per year. Sinkholes appearing in stable terrain without preceding rainfall have increased by over 200% since 2000. The second sign is birds flying without direction, moving against the season, falling from clear sky. In September 2020, an estimated 1 million migratory birds fell dead across the American Southwest from New Mexico to Colorado. Autopsies found no pathogen, no toxin. Internal conditions were consistent with acute disorientation. The event repeated in measurable scale in 2021 and again in 2023. The third sign is the ground speaking at night. Low-frequency vibration felt before it can be heard. Beginning in 2011, unexplained low-frequency hums were registered on seismic stations in Windsor, Ontario, in Taos, New Mexico, and across the British Isles. The Windsor hum was registered on instruments. Its source has never been identified. The fourth sign is the sun arriving wrong. The Sumerian sahar, displacement, the sensation of something shifted from where inherited observation placed it. In 2008, Inuit elders submitted formal testimony to the Canadian government that the sun was rising in a position different from anything observed in living memory. The fifth sign is the stars moving in ways that make inherited charts unreliable. In 2011, the FAA updated runway designations at Tampa International Airport because magnetic north had shifted enough to render existing identifiers inaccurate. The rate of magnetic north's movement has accelerated from roughly 10 kilometers per year in the early 20th century to over 50 kilometers per year now. The sixth sign is ocean waters becoming hostile to life. Fish floating on surfaces productive within living memory. Ocean dead zones have quadrupled in total area since 1950. The tablet calls this the breadth of the sky weakening, a phrase Voss reads as a reference to the magnetosphere. The seventh sign is light in the sky where it does not belong. In May 2024, auroras were visible across the continental United States, Mexico, and as far south as northern South Africa, regions with no historical record of such displays. This reflects a magnetosphere less capable of deflecting incoming charge than it was 50 years ago. The eighth sign is time becoming unreliable. Seasons arriving outside their expected windows, the sky wrong in a way people sense but cannot precisely name. In 2016, 2019, and 2022, surveys of Arctic indigenous communities recorded consistent accounts of the sun rising and setting in positions that did not match what the previous generation had observed. The ninth sign is the shortest entry. The Sumerian reads, in Voss's translation, the protection above is torn and the fire from beyond reaches the ground. The European Space Agency's SWARM mission, launched in 2013, tracks the growth of the South Atlantic anomaly, a region of weakened magnetic shielding, stretching from southern Africa across the Atlantic to South America. The anomaly is growing and has split into two lobes. Satellites passing through it experience unexplained electronic failures at a rate 3 times higher than elsewhere in their orbital paths. In 2023, satellite operators reported a 300% increase in unexplained system failures over the previous decade's baseline. The tablet says after the ninth sign, what follows cannot be turned. 8 of the 9 signs are in the geological and observational record. The ninth is present tense, active and growing. Here is the mechanism. The Anzu fragment describes Earth as having 2 kinds of motion, its daily rotation and a second, much slower rotation governing the position of the pole star over vast spans of time. This is the precession of the equinoxes, the 26,000-year cycle by which the pole shifts across the sky. Hipparchus of Nicaea is credited with discovering precession in 127 BCE. The Anzu fragment predates that discovery by 2,000 to 3,000 years. Voss used the star positions embedded in the text to confirm the tablet's age without relying on radiocarbon dates. The text describes a specific point in the precessional cycle at which 2 conditions combine. The pole reaches a particular alignment, and the sky binding, the invisible force the author treats as distinct from light, wind, and atmospheric pressure. The force Voss reads as the geomagnetic field, weakens past a threshold. When both conditions are met, a third element activates. Venus, Mars, and the Moon must align within 1 degree of a specific point in the constellation the Babylonians later called Mushussu, the dragon, positioned in what modern astronomy maps as Draco. That 3-body conjunction within 1 degree of a single point in Draco occurs once every 4,700 years. The previous occurrence was approximately 2,900 BCE, matching the flood layer in the Woolly Chamber. The next occurs in March 2029. The alignment lasts 6 hours and 14 minutes. The tablet specifies the configuration with enough precision that Voss placed it at the 14th of March 2029, beginning at 1922 UTC. A text sealed below a flood deposit 5,000 years ago named an astronomical event accurate to the hour. The tablet does not say the conjunction causes the opening. It says the conjunction is the moment the opening that has already been developing becomes complete. The way a crack in a wall does not fail when it first forms, but when the last material holding both sides together finally gives. When the sky binding reaches its minimum, the author uses the word nanasu, a compound Voss translates as the null, the between state, the moment of no direction. Every directional instrument spins without resolution. Then the background vibration of the Earth stops. Not the absence of sound, but the absence of the low-frequency hum a geomagnetically active planet continuously produces. The boundary between above and below is not a physical membrane. It is a condition maintained by the field. When the condition fails, something crosses. What crosses is in the damaged 30%. Voss has been working on it for 3 years. What the surviving text records is this. The author witnessed beings passing through the open boundary, moving with direction, remaining for 3 days, departing when the sky binding began to reassert itself. The text does not describe what those beings did during those 3 days. It jumps to the recovery, the slow return of direction to instruments, the reappearance of the background vibration, the gradual stabilization over the following weeks. Cross back to Enoch. The 70-generation sentence was always a temporary measure. Chapter 10:12 says when it expires, the bound ones are led to permanent confinement. Chapter 16:1 says the spirits of the Nephilim go out and bring destruction until the day of the great conclusion. The sentence has an end. What that end looks like, the text leaves open. The New Testament writers were reading Enoch. Jude verse 6 says the angels who did not stay within their proper position but left their dwelling, God has kept in eternal chains under gloomy darkness until the judgment of the great day. The language is Enoch's. Chains, darkness, a sentence with a terminal event. 2 Peter 2-4 says God did not spare the angels when they sinned but cast them into Tartarus, committing them to chains of gloomy darkness until the judgment. Tartarus is the deepest level in Greek cosmology, farthest from light. It maps directly onto Enoch's 70,000 leagues. The New Testament writers are compressing Enoch into letters whose readers were expected to fill in the details from the source text. Then the church removed the source. The full record describes a cycle. 9 signs, a conjunction, a period of boundary failure, something crosses, the boundary reasserts. The people who understood the signs in 2900 BCE moved to high ground, stable bedrock, interior highlands away from coastlines. The regions described by the tablet's geographical principles show elevated population density beginning shortly after 2900 BCE. The people who stayed are not in that record. Across the eastern Mediterranean during that same period, entire coastal and river valley settlements were abandoned mid-occupation, tools left in place, fires unextinguished. No conventional explanation has accounted for the simultaneity of that abandonment across geographically separated regions. The Anzu fragment was not written for the people alive when it was composed. They already knew. It was written for whoever would find it after the flood layer covered it, after the city was rebuilt above, after everything above had cycled through its formations and erasures. For whoever would be alive when the precessional clock next completed its cycle. The tablet ends with one line. Voss marks it as the passage she is most confident in, because the symbols are large, deeply pressed, and show none of the compression damage affecting the lower sections. She translates it as, "You already know what this is. You have seen the signs. The only question left is what you will do in the 3 days while the boundary is open." The author sealed the chamber in 2900 BCE and left that sentence for whoever came next. Fragment 4Q 203 is in Vault 7B in Jerusalem. JE 89289 is in the Cairo Museum basement. The Woolley Journal entry is in the Edinburgh Archive. The translation is in a laboratory in Berlin. The South Atlantic anomaly is tracked in public ESA reports. The 14th of March, 2029, 1922, UTC. Venus, Mars, and the Moon within 1 degree of Draco. The same configuration that preceded the last time the author says the boundary opened. We are whoever came next. The text does not tell you what to do with that. It only tells you that finding it was always the point.